Okay, let's carry on a little bit. So now we come to a sutta called Quarrels and Disputes, the Kalahavivādasutta. It's a sutta found in the Sutta Nipata, which is in the Khuddaka Nikaya, the shorter collection, and found in the Atthakavagga. We had a look at the sutta from the Atthakavagga in the first half of this retreat. And this is a different sutta, but very closely, not very far away from the other sutta. It's about quarrels and disputes, and the causes of quarrels and disputes, and then how to kind of get out of that, how to get free of that is the idea here. So let's have a look at this sutta. This sutta was also studied by a monk called Kathokarundanyanananda, a Sri Lankan monk who is very famous for his kind of intellectual studies. He has studied many things, and some of them are done really, really well. He passed away a few years ago, but one of his close disciples is a very close friend of Bodhinyana Monastery here, and I have been to his monastery in Sri Lanka, etc. And so we have a connection with those monks in Sri Lanka. So let's see what this sutta has to say here. So this is a discussion between a person. We don't know who that person is. Someone comes to discuss with the Buddha, and then the Buddha gives answers. It's a series of question and answer, all of it in verse form. So he asks, or she, I'm not sure if it's a he or she, but most likely, usually it's a he, so we don't know. Where do quarrels and disputes come from? And lamentations and sorrow and stinginess. What of conceit and arrogance and slander too? Tell me, please, where do they come from? So this is a kind of an unusual question, isn't it? So many things kind of grouped together and asking where do all of these things come from? Quarrels, disputes, that's kind of one thing. Then lamentation, sorrow, and then stinginess suddenly on top of that. Then conceit and arrogance, then slander kind of put in there just for good measure. It's a kind of unusual. It's very unusual, isn't it? All of these things. And then say, where do all of these things come from? So can there be one answer to this, or is there going to be many answers? That's one of the things we will find out. So what does the Buddha say then? Well, this is what he says. Quarrels and disputes come from what we hold dear. So we are here very close to what Weichuan was saying before in Majjhima Nikaya Piyajatika Sutta, born from those who are dear. It's a similar kind of thing here. Quarrels and disputes come from what we hold dear. As do lamentation and sorrow and stinginess. Conceit and arrogance too. Quarrels and disputes are linked to stinginess, and when disputes have arisen, there is slander. So, what is this about? And what this is about is, of course, that whenever we have anything that is dear to us, when we talk about dear, we mean anything that we are attached to. It can mean things, it can mean people, it can mean anything, yeah? And because something is dear to us, we will tend to argue over it. That's kind of the point. If you have a view that is very dear to you, there is rebirth. No, there is no rebirth. Oh, yes, there is rebirth. Or do you know there's rebirth? I don't know, but yes, there is rebirth. So we argue about ideas, very, very common in the world. But we also will argue over things. This is mine. No, it's mine. I want the inheritance from my parents. I want it too. I want that thing. Well, I also want that thing, etc., etc., etc. So we quarrel over the material things of the world, and we quarrel over views and ideas. These are the two kind of main areas. So what we hold dear, we argue over that. You go have a divorce, and then you argue over the children. Who is going to have the children, right? Very, very, etc., etc. All of these kind of things. As do lamentation and sorrow. Lamentation and sorrow happens because of what we hold dear. We know that very well. Someone dies. This was the sutta that Weichuan was just mentioning, and that is someone who loses his son. And he is so distraught by losing his son. He goes to the charnel ground, to the graveyard every day and says, "Where are you, my only son? Where are you, my only son?" I cannot believe that the son has disappeared, hoping beyond hope that somehow he will reappear. Maybe he didn't really die after all. Maybe he will come out of the grave or something like that. In the old days they have this little bell on the coffins in Europe. That's Ajahn Brahm tells this story all the time. So that in case the person inside wasn't dead, there was kind of a rope going through, and you could pull the rope and the bell would ring. Okay, he's not dead yet. Okay, take him out again from the coffin. It's interesting, isn't it? So it's a bit like that. You're kind of desperately hoping that someone is alive. And so this is one of the most difficult things in life, is the people we are dear to, and the sorrow and lamentation that arises from that. Stinginess comes from what we are dear, obviously. This is my stuff, keep your hands away. Stinginess, I don't want to share with anyone. Why? Because it's mine. Stinginess, conceit and arrogance. Why does that come from what we hold dear? Well, it can be that you are conceited because you are wealthy, or arrogant because you are in a high position, right? So you hold that dear, that high position. You hold that status dear, that you are special because you are higher up or whatever. And so you become stupid because of that. You hold dear to these kind of things. There was one survey, interesting one, which I've told about this here before, but it's kind of still interesting. That was done many years ago, and it was done. They looked at how owners of cars, how they reacted in traffic. Who was the most kind of considerate in traffic? Who would kind of run through a red light? Who would allow the pedestrian to pass? Who would let other cars come in front of them? And so they looked at the kind of car they had, and they correlated that with how kind they were in traffic. The better your car was, the less kind you were in traffic. So if you had an expensive car, you were very, very unfriendly. But if you had this old kind of beaten up dump of a car, then you were really kind. Okay, please come in. No problem. That's interesting. It often shows that you have a certain status. You think you are better. You hold that dear to them because you think you are better. You think you can do what you want. Something like that is going on there. You have this feeling of what's the word that I'm looking for? Feeling. Anyway. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. So conceit and arrogance also comes often from what we hold dear. Quarrel and disputes are linked to stinginess, and when disputes have arisen, there is slander. So slander then is an indirect outcome of these things. So that is already kind of a very interesting thing, because it's counter to how we normally think about things in the world. Those things that are dear, normally they are good. We think that they are one-sidedly good because they are dear to us. But actually, there's always a great downside to these things. And here the Buddha shows the downside of the things that we hold dear. Then he carries on. So where do things held dear in the world spring from? And the lusts or desires that are loose in the world, where spring the hopes and aims a man has for the next life? And the Buddha replies, what we hold dear in the world spring from desire, as do the lusts that are loose in the world. From there spring the hopes and aims a man has for his next life. It's kind of obvious. If you have desire, then you attach to things, and this will be dear to you, this will not be so dear to you. Desires are what ultimately leads us to have things that are dear to us. The lusts and desires that are let loose in the world, well, these are just another form of desire, really. So this is just desires again. And the fact that you have hopes and aims for your next life, well, that also comes from desire. If you didn't have any desire, you wouldn't have any hopes and aims for your next life. And so desires are here. Here we're talking about tanha, really. Yeah, the craving. In fact, this whole sequence we're seeing now mirrors dependent origination quite closely. So what is piya to you is very similar to the idea of upadana. Upadana means you take something up. You grasp something, you hold on to something. And the reason you grasp onto things in the world is because you have desires. You grasp onto a house or a family or a job or to being a Buddhist or whatever it might be. And these things come from desires because we want to be happy and these kind of things. So the sequence here mirrors dependent origination. So that always makes it interesting when you can recognize the various doctrines, if you like, in the suttas and how they cross over between each other. So where do the desires in the world spring from? And evaluations too. Where do they come from? And anger, lies, and indecision, and other things spoken of by the ascetic. The ascetic is the Buddha. It's kind of just a way of talking about the Buddha. So the desires, evaluations, this is good, this is bad, and then anger, lies, and indecision. And other things, that's pretty broad, isn't it? Other things spoken of by the ascetic. Not sure how that should be understood, but anyway. What they call pleasure and pain in the world, based on that desire comes about. Seeing the appearance and disappearance of forms, the person makes evaluation in the world. Anger, lies, and indecision, these things are too, when that pair is present, the pair being the pleasure and pain. One who is indecisive should train in the path of knowledge. It is the path of knowledge. Okay, I think this is the next verse. It's very confusing here. So let's just leave that aside for now. So pleasure and pain. Now we are in the Vedana. So Vedana Pacchaya Tanha. So with previous one was desires. What is the cause for desires? Well, pain and pleasure are the cause for desires. And seeing the appearance and disappearance of forms, a person makes evaluation in the world. By seeing what is worth holding on to, what is not worth holding on to. You evaluate the world according to what is substantial and insubstantial, what will be useful for you and what will not. The appearance and disappearance of forms, something like that. I'm not entirely sure what is meant by this, but something like that. Then you evaluate the various things, and then the evaluation is like desire. And then anger, lies, and indecision come from pleasure and pain. Because of pleasure and pain, we will sometimes lie and get angry and be indecisive because we want pleasure, we don't want pain, and so we will often do things that we should not do in our pursuit of pleasure in the world, in the pursuit of avoiding pain. We become stupid in the face of these things. We start doing things that we should not do. And I think pretty much everyone has done that occasionally, because you really don't want to, don't want your parents to know that you damaged something when you were a little child, you destroy something. Did you do this? No. How did it happen? Don't know. Because you don't want that punishment from your parents or whatever. So, this runs the world. Pain and pleasure is what runs the world in so many ways. One who is indecisive should train in the path of knowledge. It is this from the knowledge that the ascetic speaks of these things. Actually, I think that belongs to the previous one. I was getting very confused now. Okay, let's leave that to one side. So, where do pleasure and pain spring from? We're going further and further back in dependent origination. When what is absent, do these things not occur? And also, on the topic of appearance and disappearance, tell me where they spring from. So where does pleasure and pain come from? Well, you know now, right? Because you know this is like dependent origination, so we can assume contact is the answer. Pleasure and pain spring from contact. When contact is absent, they do not occur. And on the topic of appearance and disappearance, I tell you, they also spring from contact. So we're talking about forms, disappear and appearing and disappearing. Contact is the cause. As long as you are in contact with that form, it is there. When the contact stops, and then the form is gone. That's how they, and that's how we make decisions about them. So contact is the answer there. So let's go further. So where does contact in the world spring from? And possessions too, where do they come from? And what is absent? When what is absent, is there no possessiveness? And what disappears, do contacts not strike? So where do contacts come from? And possessiveness is a kind of contact here, presumably. The answer is name and form cause contact. Possessions spring from wishing. When wishing is absent, there is no possessiveness. When forms disappear, contacts do not strike. So this is getting more difficult. And here, name and form. Well, what is name and form? Well, name and form is basically what a being is. A being. You have name. Name is here the mental aspect of the being, and form is the physical aspect of a being. And these two aspects are required for there to be contact. And this is something you find, if you want to read about this, you find this in the Digha Nikaya Long Discourses number 15, the Mahanidana Sutta. This is described in quite a bit of detail. And you do need someone to explain to you what's going on, because it's not easy to understand. And there, people have written about this, like Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, to explain what is going on. But contact basically happens. How does it happen? Well, first there is what is called impingement contact. Impingement means it kind of hits the eye. Something hits the eye, the form. So bing, light hits the eye, and that is required for there to be seeing. If there is no eye, you cannot see. But then you also need the mind to interpret that. And that is called the adivachana sampassa in Pali, which is translated as designation contact, I think, in English. So first of all, it hits the eye, and then the mind makes sense of it. It designates it. So it impinges on the eye, then you designate it. So you need both name and form for there to be contact. So you have contact, and then you feel something because of that. And because you feel something, then you have craving. And because you're craving, it becomes dear to you. And because it comes dear to you, you have quarrels and arguments. That's what the Buddha is saying. So it comes from name and form. And because it comes from name and form, and because this is what we are, if you want to give it up, basically you have to give up name and form. You have to give up you have to give up what you are, basically. You have to end all of this stuff. That's basically what the Buddha is saying. So this is how these things are very, very profound. So why did I choose this sutta? I'm not sure now anymore. I can't remember. The reason is because I've never done it before, so I thought we had to do some new sutta, so I chose this one. And now I'm not sure if it was a good idea. But anyway, here it is. So it's always a good idea, because you always learn something nice from it. So when wishing is absent, there is no possessiveness, so that's kind of obvious. You wish for things and you possess things, and when forms disappear, then contacts don't strike, because form is part of name and form, right? If it's only name, then there is virtually no contact remaining, and things come to an end. So, okay, let's carry on to the end of the sutta. Form disappears for one proceeding how? What do you have to do for forms to disappear? How do happiness and suffering disappear? Tell me how they disappear. I think we ought to know these things. Yes, you ought to know these things. So how does all of this happen? Without normal perception or distorted perception. Not lacking perception, nor perceiving what has disappeared. Form disappears for one proceeding thus. For judgments due to proliferation spring from perception. So this is very kind of hard to translate and very hard to really know what actually is going on here. So this is talking about kind of not having a usual kind of, not perceiving the world in a normal way, but perceiving the world in a different way. This is kind of what is going on here. You don't have distorted perception, but you still have a perception. Without normal perception, again, this could be the distorted one, nor perceiving what has disappeared. So the main idea here comes in the last line. For judgments due to proliferation spring from perception. And so the idea here is that we have to give up this tendency to proliferation. This is where all of these things come from. This is what is found also in the Madhupindaka Sutta. Majjhima Nikaya 18 talks about the problem of proliferation, how that proliferation gives rise to all the craving and all the desires in the world, ultimately leading to arguments and problems, just as we see here. So what, again, is the cause of proliferation? Well, I discussed that earlier on. This is found in the Sakapanya Sutta, Digha Nikaya 21, where that proliferation actually is not really found there. It's found elsewhere in the suttas. But the proliferation arises out from the sense of me and I. That is where it all comes from, ultimately. And so the ending of all of these things, the ending of all of these problems, it comes first of all due to the giving up of the sense of I. Because the sense of I is false anyway. So you haven't really given anything up. You've just given up a lie. You've given up fake news. I'm not sure if it's news, probably it's olds. You've given up fake olds. Whatever that is. You've given up something which doesn't really exist. And that is always going to be good, always going to be positive. So then those judgments are also going to stop, because you stop the proliferating tendency of the mind. And because you do that, then the proliferation stops, and then eventually that leads to the ending of certain perceptions. And when those certain perceptions end, then the form comes to an end ultimately. And this is really what we're talking about here, is almost like the cessation sequence, I think, of dependent origination, where everything just ceases, and for that reason everything comes to an end, and there are no more arguments and problems in the world as a consequence. It also ends for the Arahant, so both of these things happen at the same time. The Arahant doesn't proliferate, the Arahant doesn't have a sense of I, and so the arguments stop as well, but they still have to feel some of these feelings, like happy and unhappy feelings. So peace, because we're dealing with peace, because we're dealing with freedom, and because the arguments in the world and all of these things in the world are the opposite of freedom. If you want to become free, if you want to give up all of these negative things in your life, you have to give up the sense of I. That's what it's saying, just like in the Sakapanya Sutta. That's what it comes down to. So if you really want to be happy, the only way to find that freedom is to give up the I-making, the mind-making, the perception I am, which actually is at the root of all of this. Okay. Whatever I asked you, you have explained to me. I ask you once more, please tell me this. Do some wise people here say that this is the highest extent of purity of the spirit? I'm not sure what that means, but anyway, Or do they say it is something else? Some wise people do say that this is the highest extent of purity of the spirit, but some of them, claiming to be experts, speak of an occasion when there is no residue. Knowing that these states are dependent and knowing what they depend on, the inquiring sage, having understood, is freed and enters no dispute. The attentive do not proceed to life after life. So, So they speak of an occasion when there is no residue. So this is kind of when we talk about the Dhamma all the way to the end. There comes a point when there is nothing left. There is no residue. This is kind of the highest one. So you become an arahant, and then beyond arahantship, there is a state when there is no residue. Knowing that these things are dependent, and knowing what they depend on. This is the critical thing. This is the understanding of dependent origination. Knowing dependency. And if you understand dependency, you take away the factors at the very foundation, at the root of that dependency, ignorance, then you are freed. And once you are freed, once you are an arahant, you enter no dispute. Like the Buddha says, the world may dispute with the Buddha, but the Buddha does not dispute with the world. The attentive, in other words, the wise, they do not proceed from life to life. Anyway, that sutta probably deserves a lot more treatment than I have given it now, and should probably go into great detail with it, but at least it gives you a feeling for some of these really profound suttas that are found scattered through the Pali Canon, and how they kind of work out and what they actually are. So, I think that is enough for this session. So, are there any more comments or questions? Or are the questions or are you so confused you don't even know which question to ask?
Ajahn, thank you very much for introducing this sutta. I think this is very good, very, very good for me, at least. Sadhu, sadhu,
okay,
sadhu.
Great, okay, excellent. Glad to hear that. That's wonderful. Okay, anyone else? Oh, over here? Oh, just over there. Please raise your hand again. Is it? No, this one. Yeah.
Good evening, good afternoon, Ajahn. So you mentioned that proliferation arises from eye-making, right?
Yeah.
So in light of nowadays, there are like so many mental health issues, right? And people are like mentally proliferating thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So how do we give up the eye-making?
It is not the answer to the all the mental instability that people have and they're proliferating so much. The answer is not to give up the eye-making because it's too profound. The answer is found in much simpler things, like simply by thinking about things in a different way. You're proliferating because you're anxious, and then you want to overcome that anxiety. And one of the ways of doing that, someone mentioned the other day here, is just to do a little bit of meditation to calm yourself down, watching the breath or something like that is one way of doing that. But also just to live well. If you start living with more metta and compassion in the world, that is incompatible with anxiety and this kind of proliferations. So just learning to have metta, learning to see other people in the right way. Some of the ways that I've been talking about here, by just learning that other people are kind of robots, that do things because they do things in a certain way, and actually there's no need to blame them. And then having metta in the world means seeing the goodness in the world, seeing that there are people who live well, who do kind things, and appreciating that. Sometimes we get so biased, all we see is the darkness and the negativity, and we forget about all the goodness. But there's a lot of goodness in the world also. One of the best ways of seeing the goodness in the world is to start doing good things yourself. It's very strange, but very often we don't see things because we are trapped in the way of looking at the world where we don't look for these things. We don't do it ourselves, and so we don't see it in others. But the moment you start to be generous and kind, actually you start to see that actually it's everywhere. Lots of people are kind. Lots of people do little nice things. And that opens up your eyes to that. And that's it's this kind of strange psychological thing. We tend to see the world as we behave towards the world. If you behave towards the world in a certain way, you tend to see those things coming back to you as well. If you are very angry with the world, you see the anger of the world towards you. If you are kind to the world, you see the kindness coming back. And so very often, a lot of these anxieties really can be resolved, to some extent at least, simply by practicing these teachings, by doing the right thing, living in the right way, learning to see things slightly differently, and you can overcome many of these problems. So I think that is much more useful than stopping the eye-making, because very often, if you try to stop the eye-making too early on, you're not ready for that. Stopping the eye-making comes from deep insight and deep meditation. It's not something you can really just, stop on the surface so much. And you risk just suppressing things, and you risk doing what is sometimes called spiritual bypassing. You're bypassing the whole path and kind of going straight to the result, and what you end up doing is just suppressing the problems rather than actually dealing with them properly.
Suki Hontu Ajahn.
Hi.
Hi. When you say be kind, right? You need to use wisdom with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Not be a doormat, right?
Not be a doormat. Yeah, please not be a doormat. Yeah.
So if you if you try your very, very best to be kind, but it's not reciprocated back. Okay lah, there'll be expectation that, you do kind, then you should receive kind back. But if you don't get that same feedback back, right, do you still continue? Thank you.
So it depends. I mean, it's a difficult situation, and usually if people, sometimes we are manipulated by people, and people will manipulate us, and we feel that there's a pressure to be kind. For example, this is one thing that can happen. And one of the things that I just mentioned this a few days ago here is that if you are pressured by other people to be kind, then don't be kind. That's that's a nice way of it, because it's not really coming from kindness anymore. You're doing it because of some kind of pressure or something, and it destroys the value of the kindness if you're doing it because of pressure. I notice with someone like Ajahn Brahm, if he feels that you are manipulating him or pressuring him, he will not do things anymore. He will be kind when he wants to, not because you are pressuring him. And so that's one way of thinking about this. Be kind when you want to be kind. Be kind to people where you don't have a relationship, where you are pressured, or where they don't care about you or whatever. Be kind to strangers. If you're kind to a stranger, there is no relationship, and because there is no relationship, there is no expectation or anything like that. If you're kind to, it's a very pure form of kindness. If you're kind to a stranger, so be kind to strangers. Be kind to people who don't expect you to be kind. People who are kind of, your colleague at work or whatever, be kind to them. Be kind to, and then if someone doesn't show any appreciation and you feel this becoming difficult to be kind, then just wait till the desire to be kind comes again. So be kind, but when you feel like it, when it feels natural, when it comes. Don't become nasty, obviously. That's also not the kind of the idea here. The idea is just to kind of withdraw a little bit, to build up your own energy and to look after yourself, to know your own limitations. So it is hard to be kind. We have to accept our human limits. It's hard to be kind if it's not appreciated. And so then you understand the limits of what you can do. So you hold back a little bit, and then when you can be kind, then you are kind. So, okay. Anyone else want to say anything here? Everyone happy? Okay, good. I am glad. So maybe that means that we can have a break. So let's have a break. And we will come back again at 3:45 and carry on.